Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Go Big or Go Home. I am Old Man Troy, joined by the safe and sound youngster, Kevin Cunningham, a.k.a. Kid Cunny on Twitter. Kevin, I'm glad that you made it through the hurricane storms because you are from Jacksonville. So glad that you're safe, your family's safe. I mean that with all sincerity. No sarcasm in that one. Glad you and your loved ones are safe. Glad we can do the show this week.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I wasn't sure when I'd be able to do this show because I am down here in Jacksonville, Florida, and I will say this, that in Jacksonville, I mean, if there was one place you wanted to be in the state of Florida, it was probably Jacksonville. Downtown Jacksonville, not so much because you're by a river and there was a ton of flooding. But where I was, it really was the northeast corner of Florida and away from any bodies of water. So, I mean, there were no trees, at least close to my house, that fell or got toppled over. There were no huge branches in the street. There was really nothing going on due to this hurricane in my neighborhood, and I've got work tomorrow. So, I mean, there's no damage around me, which I can't be more thankful of, I guess, how the storm played out for myself. Obviously, I've got some family members down south in southern Florida, but they're all safe and sound. So I appreciate the well wishes, and I guess not necessarily well wishes, but just thanks that everyone is safe. I thank you for I'm not even sure of the word I'm trying to get out, but yeah, my family's safe. I appreciate your thoughts with me and my family, Troy, and obviously to do this show and to have my power back as of late last night. I'm very happy to have something different to eat than peanut butter now. So it's talking sports, just in general. I'm having a good day as a whole because, people close to me, myself, no one got affected terribly. Power's back on. I couldn't, I guess, have asked that storm for me and my family to have gone any better is the long answer that I'll give, I suppose.
Well, I'll tell you, Kevin, there are things bigger than sports in this world, and Hurricane Irma was one of them. But I will tell you it's a catch-22 because sports can be the getaway. Sports can be like the healing Band-Aid, and I say that because you look at NFL games being played, Monday Night Football games being played. You and I doing this show, I'm sure for you it was no fun being in that storm, but now today, power back, you're able to talk sports, you're able to take your mind off things that had happened, and that's why I say it's a catch-22. Yes, there's things bigger than sports in the world, but it seems like sports always has a way to unite people. Sports has a way to help people cope and get through things that have happened with them. So it's kind of one of those catch-22s, like, hey, sports isn't everything in the world. No, it's not, but sports can be a great healer. And so I'm glad that your power's back. I texted you yesterday, hey, let's not worry about the show until you're all situated, things are up and better. And, hey, we couldn't ask for a better day. I mean, one day later than we normally record after a horrific storm that crushed through Florida, I'll take it because I love talking sports with you. But, Kevin, before we start, you got live commentary of this. So those that listen in all the time know that we record this show after I'm done working while I'm driving home. And today, Kevin, I had to take a different route. So GPS takes me on this back road up to the turnpike. So I'm kind of slow getting into the ticket place to grab my ticket for the turnpike. Lady's laying on the horn behind me, just laying the horn on. I grab my ticket. We get on the turnpike. Well, it's clogged up. So we're in the right lane behind a cement truck, and we're in the slow lane. So she decides that she's mad at me, gets into the left lane, floors it, just floors her Explorer to go 10 yards. Literally 10 yards, 2 car lengths. And then I get behind her, and really, I wanted to get out of my car and just talk some sense into her. Like, why are you so irate? And at me, what did I do? But I'll tell you, Kevin, drivers are crazy. They're crazy, and so is the new AP college football poll. That's a great lead-in. That thing is crazy. And I've told you, I text you after Ohio State lost. that if something happened, be prepared for me to go on a rant. I will warn the listeners, I am going to go on a rant today. Kevin has already been informed to interrupt me because I may just keep going and going like the Energizer Bunny, because this is not sitting well with me, Kevin. I'm going to turn it back over to you, let you recap the top 10, and you can take it however you want, because I'm sure at some point I'm just going to interrupt you and just go on my rant.
Probably, most likely. But regardless, I did want to get to one of your other points quickly. You said sports can be a great getaway and coping mechanism, and I listen to one sports show every day somewhat religiously, although over the last few months it hasn't been as religiously. But even that person, I won't name his name, but that person did like a poll, I think it was on Twitter, and it's like, what are sports for you? You know, is it just pure entertainment? Is it a getaway from your everyday life? There were a couple other options, but that was the main answer for people. It was like close to 50% of, you know, these thousands and thousands of votes was that it was a getaway to get away from your everyday life. And it was somewhat depressing. It's like sports are meant to be entertainment. They're not meant to get you out of the terrible life that you live. I don't think that's generally how people at least want to think of sports, but that's how half the country kind of watches sports, is to get away from their miserable lives, basically, is what that poll kind of got out of. That's what I got out of that poll. But so I think, and it just is interesting to me because football basically takes place for around 4 months, college, NFL, and it always takes place on the weekend. And it's something people in general can look forward to, because you have your 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and obviously you can have ridiculous hours like Troy does, sometimes myself as well. But typically you have your 9 to 5 job Monday through Friday, and then boom, Saturday, college football. Oh my God, this is awesome. And then Sunday, you've got more football, and it's the NFL, and it's week 1, and then, you know, Hurricane Irma is going bonkers, and people probably in Montana don't want to hear about Hurricane Irma anymore, because it's just like, okay, this is affecting the southeast part of the country, whatever. I just want to get to my football, and there it is, you know, for you on a platter, week 1. On Sunday, you know, getting you away from your life and what you have to think of for Monday at work and the crap that you're going to have to go through there. So I thought it was interesting that you brought up that point that sports are kind of a getaway for people, because half the country, that's how they see it, is, okay, it's the weekend, I can just chill out and relax and watch sports, and primarily in the fall, it's football. And to me personally, and I'm not going to go out on this big sidetrack before we finally get into the AP poll, but I think if you switch the sports around and you had basketball being played in the fall once a week, and it was just on the weekend, and you had the NFL, which obviously, again, this can't happen, but if basketball were a 16-game season, the NBA or college basketball during the fall, and football was on, you know, there were 80 games throughout the week, or throughout the year, and every single day of the week there's football games. I think that the country would gravitate toward basketball just because of when it is being played on the weekend, when you can sit and chill, get away from your 9 to 5 jobs through the week, and just sit down and watch basketball as opposed to football. I don't necessarily think this country just absolutely adores football that much more than basketball, like the ratings and money revenue would show you and tell you in TV ratings. But if you flip the sports, I think it's just a lot more convenient for people to get away from their work lives basically during the week, and again, just sit down, chill, and watch TV, sports, entertainment on the weekend to get away from your everyday life. But I just thought it was interesting that you brought that up. Anyway, I will finally shut up, and we can get into college football. And the top 10 AP poll was released on September 10th, which was Sunday. That's when it's going to come out every week, is every Sunday. And typically we'll record the show on a Monday. As far as when it gets on the gruelingtruth.net to actually listen to this show, or if you follow us on Twitter and you can listen to the show that way. We typically record a day after, like Troy mentioned. We're doing this on a Tuesday, so it's going to be a little later this week than usual probably. But number 1 is Alabama, and number 2 is Oklahoma. Oklahoma beat Ohio State a week ago. They were number 5. They moved up to number 2, which Troy said, if Oklahoma were to beat Ohio State a week ago, they should move right into that number 2 spot, as long as, you know, Alabama doesn't lose. And Alabama didn't lose. Oklahoma won. Cool for them. Bad for the Big Ten. Bad for Ohio State, although some Big Ten teams are going to love that Ohio State lost. But Oklahoma, rightfully, I think, and probably Troy thinks, moved up to number 2. Clemson stayed at number 3. USC beat number 14 Stanford. They were number 6 last week. They're now number 4, so they jumped Penn State. Penn State moved back from 4 to 5, but Penn State played a cupcake. Not necessarily a cupcake. They beat Pitt, but Pitt's not a
I will interrupt there, Kevin, shortly.
Okay.
If you remember last week's show, I called it a cupcake. I said
Mm-hmm.
Pitt wasn't that good this year. They're not. I watched the game. Pitt has a lot of young guys. They played with a ton of enthusiasm. Hats off. They actually controlled the time of possession in the first half. At times, they actually played well in the trenches. They're a good young team. But as far as talent level goes, it was a cupcake game for Penn State. They should have won that game by more, in my mind. Penn State let Pitt in that game for such a long time. And the way it started, you thought Penn State would run away with it. But, Pitt was very much they were like a little mosquito that you just couldn't kill. They just kept hanging around. And I don't think Penn State thought that Pitt was going to do that. But in my mind, that was a cupcake game for Penn State, Kevin, even though it's a rivalry game, because Pitt this year is not that good.
Yeah. Yeah, and Penn State, we were talking about the spread last week, that Penn State was favored by 21 points, and I'm like, this is still Pitt. It's a rivalry game. They end up winning by 19. Troy, you were talking about how it should be a blowout, and I agree with you. It should have been more than a 19-point game. In the end, Pitt covered, which is what betting people care about. But like you said, the game never got truly out of hand, which kind of surprised you and me realistically when looking more into it. It surprised me as well. I think Penn State should have won by more than 19 points. But for right now, the number 5 in the country, you people that are out there and saying, oh, my God, why are we number 5? We're on the outside looking in. Right now, obviously you want to be in the top 4, but you've got about another 10 weeks. So chill out, basically, is my message there. Washington was number 7 last week. They're number 6 this week behind Penn State at number 5. I don't know who Washington beat, but they're number 6. And, now is when you start looking for Ohio State because, again, they lost to the number 5 team in the country. And so Washington is up there in 6th. They're ahead of Ohio State. Ohio State was number 2. You lose to the number 5 team. You shouldn't fall that far. And at number 7 is Michigan. And Michigan was number 8 last week. They're number 7. This week, Ohio State is number 8. And Michigan beat Cincinnati. And they didn't do so extremely comfortably. So I know that Troy is kind of wondering why Michigan is number 7 and Ohio State fell from number 2 to number 8 after losing to the number 5 team in the country in Oklahoma.
I'm going to let you continue with the top 10. And
okay.
The reason is because I'm getting off the turnpike, and I don't want to be a ranting turnpike guy. So, excuse me, made myself choke. But I'm going to let you round out the top 10, and then I'm going to go back to the 7, 8, 9, 10 ranking part of it. And then like I said, going to go off on that rant. And by the time you're done with the top 10, it'll be smooth sailing with nothing for me to do but rant about the voters.
Sounds like a plan. So Michigan is number 7. So you got Penn State at number 5. That's the top Big Ten team now. Michigan is number 7. That's the second Big Ten team. Ohio State fell down to 8. That's the third Big Ten team. Oklahoma State jumped over Wisconsin because Oklahoma State beat South Alabama. That's not a quality victory. Why Oklahoma State jumped from 11 to 9 and passed Wisconsin, kind of beyond me. I'm sure Troy will touch on it. And Wisconsin finalizes the top 10. They were number 9 a week ago. Again, they dropped back to number 10 because Oklahoma State, for whatever reason, jumped them. Again, realistically, you're number 9, you're number 10 after week 2. It is what it is. It really doesn't matter, and especially because this is the AP poll and not the college football playoff ranking, committee poll that actually chooses the top 4. So the AP has nothing to do with that, but it does help influence probably what the college football playoff committee thinks of these teams. Again, that being said, Wisconsin finalizes the top 10 at number 10, and that's it for the Big Ten. Again, still 4 teams in the top 10 after Ohio State loses. Still a heck of a conference. You have to wonder what exactly Ohio State is after losing fairly easily to Oklahoma. They played a tough first half, but after that it was kind of all Oklahoma. But again, Penn State at number 5, Michigan number 7, Ohio State 8, Wisconsin 10, and that's it for the Big Ten. Maryland got other votes. They'd be 31st. Iowa got other votes. They'd be 37th. Michigan State got 1 vote. They'd be 41st. That's it for the Big Ten. Again, just 4 teams in the top 25, but all of them in the top 10, and Ohio State drops. That's kind of the biggest news from 2 to 8.
Okay, so Kevin, let's kind of dissect this a little bit. You know my thoughts about these polls to begin with. I think they're a bunch of baloney before the regular season starts in the conference. And so at this point, we still talk about them. And they're important because they're very important for where you are ranked. Like you said, Penn State fans, just chill. Just chill out. If you look at the top 5, to me, Kevin, I'm okay with it. You know, Alabama, sure, they're not moving anywhere unless they lose. Even if they struggle, even if they win on a last-second field goal or missed field goal, they're not moving out of the number 1 spot. Oklahoma beat your number 2. And when I say, I'm going to preface this, when I say your, I'm talking directly to the people involved in putting the poll together. They beat your number 2 team. Kudos. You moved them into the number 2 slot. That should happen. All right? Clemson, they stayed at 3. No worries. That's where they should stay. Number 4, USC, they played a top 20 team. Good for USC. Took care of business. They deserved to move up. They beat a ranked team. They're one of the few in the top 10 outside of Ohio State that didn't play a cupcake this week. Then you look at the number 5 team, Penn State. Yes, you should have fallen because USC won. They vaulted over you. I have no problem with that at all. Now, Kevin, when we move down the list, and I'm just going to jump to Michigan. Michigan plays Cincinnati. And if you're a national championship contender, if you're a top 10 team, you should not struggle with a Cincinnati team. Cincinnati had moments years ago. This is not a Cincinnati team of 5 years ago or 6 years ago when they had quarterbacks and playmakers and skill players. This is a Cincinnati team. This, again, was their Super Bowl. If they could beat Michigan, that would make their season. They didn't do it. Michigan pulled away in the second half, literally the fourth quarter. But they did not play well. So, again, you are looking at a score. Because what was the final score, Kevin, we looked it up, 34-16? It looks like they comfortably beat a Cincinnati team when they didn't beat Cincinnati comfortably. Cincinnati was hanging in this game. I turned it on. I told you, you know my thoughts. I don't watch these games. I had the Wisconsin game on in the background while I was doing other things. I think I watched maybe 10 plays of that game, but I had it on in the background so I could hear it because it was on the Big Ten Network. But I tuned into Michigan, Kevin, because I wanted to see what Cincinnati was doing. Because it was game break, like, hey, Cincinnati's hanging around. And so Michigan did not play dominant football. They did not deserve to move into the top 10 after beating a cupcake. No way, no how. They made their vault in week number 1. They moved up, I think they moved up, 1 spot, 2 spot, whatever. Week 1, they had a good win. Week 2, you're where you're at because you put them there. Do not reward them for week 1. And that's what I think happened, Kevin. They got rewarded for week 1 when they shouldn't have. You came out with your poll this week or last week, and all of a sudden, that's where you put Michigan. Then they beat a cupcake, and they don't do it 60-0. They actually had to play football for 60 minutes. Doesn't sit well with me. Then you move to Ohio State. Why are you punishing Ohio State for losing to the 5th-ranked team? You dropped them 6 spots past the team that beat them. So I don't understand this, Kevin. It's not like they lost to a 25th-ranked team or a 20th-ranked team or a non-ranked team. They lost to the 5th-ranked team in the country, according to your poll. And now you're going to drop them to 8? Unbelievable. No way, no how should they have dropped farther than 5. Did they play well? No. You and I text a little bit. Barrett, it is what it is. Like you said, it's resemblance of last year.
Yep.
They didn't play well. But even if they didn't play well, it was the 5th-ranked team in the country. You should not fall past number 5. If people disagree with me, find me on Twitter, TroyRobert967, or find the youngster at Kid Cunny. I do want to think we've got some interaction going on Twitter, Kevin. It's actually kind of nice. Not to get off my rant, but we actually have people that converse with us on Twitter. It's great. So
yeah, we did.
Converse with us. If you think I'm off my rocker that they should have fallen to number 8 and that's where they should be, then tell me why. Tell me why they should be number 8 and not number 5. And my last part of this rant, and then I want to get your thoughts, Kevin. Wisconsin, I know they played a cupcake team. I know they did, but they took care of business. And so now, why are you dropping them to 10? Because Oklahoma State beat South Alabama? When is South Alabama going to contend for a national title? When is South Alabama going to be a dominant top 20 team? Come on now. You move a team ahead of another team that you put in your poll at number 9. And all they did is take care of business in week 1, take care of business in week 2, and now you're going to punish them by moving them to 10. I still don't think they're the 10th best team in the country, Kevin, but I think it's not right that they had to move down. You, the voters, put them at number 9. Now you want to move them to 10 because you're probably realizing, oh, my, maybe we shouldn't have put Wisconsin at 9. No, you shouldn't have, but you did. So now why are you punishing them?
Yep.
This is crazy to me, Kevin. You move Oklahoma State up because, okay, do I think Oklahoma State is better than Wisconsin? Yes, I do. But when you're looking at the polls and you're looking at this human nature of what they want to do, this stuff this week was ultimately crazy. And if this is going to be any indication of what goes on for the next 12 weeks, I'm probably going to get a sore throat every week because I'm just going to keep going on these rants. I don't understand 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't understand it. I want to get your thoughts. I need a drink of water. My throat is dry.
Yeah, I can't give you a simple answer as to, look, here's why Michigan is number 7, here's why Ohio State's 8, Oklahoma State 9, Wisconsin 10, because it's just kind of, you're somewhat contradicting yourself no matter how you want to look at it if you're an AP voter. And again, this is not one committee who's saying, okay, here is our number 7 team. We agree Michigan's the number 17 in the country. The whole committee is not saying, okay, we agree Ohio State's the number 18 in the country. The way the AP poll works is every voter gets their vote as to where each team should be placed. And if Ohio State's placed first, then they get 25 votes. And if Ohio State's placed second, they get 24 votes. And if you're placed 25th, you get 1 vote. But so all these votes are combined, and basically Michigan had a pretty sizable difference in terms of the 1,107 votes they got, and Ohio State had 1,003. So there's over 100 votes difference there. And just for perspective, Ohio State had 1,003 votes, or points, I guess you can call it, and Oklahoma State had 1,002. They had 1 fewer. So if one voter would have switched Oklahoma State for Ohio State, assuming they had them back-to-back and Ohio State was ahead of Oklahoma State would have been number 8, and Ohio State would have moved back to number 9. It was that close. And Wisconsin is just 10 points behind Ohio State, 9 points behind Oklahoma State, so they're not far from being number 8 in the country. So a lot of these have very few There's a very small amount of votes that are separating number 8, number 9, literally 1 point out of the thousands of points these teams are getting. And same with Ohio State or Wisconsin. So I think that voters, and this is unfortunate because you have a week 1 poll that you have to release this preseason poll. And I think that my guess is that these voters are like, here's our thoughts going into the season. And then we're just kind of going to not necessarily go rogue and, not regard our week 1 thoughts. But here's what we think now. We think that
No, Kevin, I'm going to stop you there, and I'm going to say, yes, that's exactly what they're doing. They don't know what the hell they're doing when they release the preseason poll. That's why there shouldn't be one. Because
Correct.
It's already evident in week 2 that there is bias going on here. Oklahoma State, they should have been ranked higher in the preseason poll. I have no problem saying that. I don't even have a problem with them being in the top 10 right now, Kevin. I have a problem with how they got there because of the poll, because you don't know what you're doing. And you're exactly right. They have went rogue. They are going renegade. That preseason poll is crap. That's all I got.
No, yeah. And again, what's contradicting about it is if you're going by resume and what these teams are doing and what they look like, basically Wisconsin has beaten 2 bad teams and by a sizable score at the end of the game. And same thing with Oklahoma State. They beat Tulsa week 1 by 35 points. You beat South Alabama by 37 points. You're taking care of your cupcakes, and just like Wisconsin is doing. But people are saying, wow, look at this Oklahoma State offense, look at their quarterback, look what they can do, as opposed to Wisconsin and ground and pound, and you're getting a freshman running back who's becoming a beast. But he's a freshman, and Wisconsin
he certainly made a name for himself this weekend, didn't he, Kevin? That is Paul Chris football. So again, they're being punished for playing their style of football, which could win Big Ten. It really could, because defensively, that defensive unit that I think has some holes and is very young is only going to get better. But offensively, from what I heard and what I was watching the little bit that I did, it was Paul Chris football. It was Wisconsin football. Keep the ball out of the quarterback's hand. Give my big burly linemen the meat. Give them the bone. Dangle the bone in front of them and let them smash the guy in front of them so my running back can go into the lane and just get yardage. That's what Wisconsin did, and again, they get punished for it. If you can tell, little irate about it.
A little bit. But yeah, and this is going to be a shameless plug, finally got the word out there, to Land of 10 and where I write stories for. That's Land of 10, if you follow them on Twitter, landof10.com, that's all Big Ten. That's all they care about is the Big Ten. And we talked about Jonathan Taylor on the site a week ago. His freshman debut a week ago against, it was Utah State, was Wisconsin's first opponent, and Jonathan Taylor was kind of, he took a few carries for a lot of yards. I don't remember exactly, what the statistics were week 1, but it's like, hey, this kid could be the real deal. And then week 2, he picks up, I've got the stats here, 26 carries, 223 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's a freshman running back at Wisconsin. So he's going to be really good for the next 3 years until he turns pro, or if he wants to be a senior, the next 4 years and until he turns pro. Obviously, he's going to have a lot of opportunities because week 2, his freshman year, he's getting 26 touches, taking it to the house 3 times, 223 yards. He's the real deal. He's the next big thing at Wisconsin, a running back. Jonathan Taylor is the name. Again, just had to shout out Land of 10 because we talked about him a week prior to this huge breakout game, knowing that the opportunity was there. But in any case, like I said before, with this top 10 to kind of close the topic, that you're kind of contradicting yourself. If you think Oklahoma State's that much better, not that much better, obviously it's a very finite amount of votes and scores and points that Oklahoma State is better than Wisconsin according to this poll. But if you think Oklahoma State's better, that's fine. I don't disagree. Troy doesn't disagree. I agree that their offense has more going for it than just pounding a freshman running back behind a really good offensive line. I agree. But at the same time, Michigan did not look fantastic against Cincinnati. So why are you penalizing Ohio State to put them behind a team like Michigan, yet still ahead of a team like Oklahoma State, who obviously people are starting to like more and more the more that they see them? I knew that before the season started. That was one of the 8 or so teams I thought could win the whole thing because of how explosive Oklahoma State's offense was. But so you're just kind of, it doesn't really make sense to reward Michigan, obviously 100 points better than Ohio State in this poll after somewhat struggling against Cincinnati, which, Troy, I'm glad you kind of picked out that game and saying you can't just look at the box score, you can't just look at the final score and say Michigan cruised, which their 22-point victory would tell you that Michigan just cruised past Cincinnati. That's not necessarily how it went. You have to watch these games, which these committee members are supposed to do. But they obviously like Michigan a lot more than Ohio State. Again, after Ohio State lost to now the number 2 team in the country, after being tied at halftime. So it's not as though Ohio State just completely got blown out. I guess that's all I got, is that it doesn't really make sense, but we are 2 weeks in. Obviously, the more games, it's going to help these voters formulate their ideas on these teams. And, I have decent ideas of what these teams are going in, but obviously I'm incorrect about some things, just like anyone else is. I can be correct about certain things, but just the way I see it, there are still 8 or so teams that really have a shot at winning, and it's because of their offense, realistically. Florida State had their chances dinged week 1, not because they lost, but because they lost their quarterback for the year. So that threw Florida State out of it. But for right now, I can see Oklahoma State winning the whole thing. I still think Ohio State can. I just don't think it's likely. Oklahoma State can. I think Washington can. Penn State can. USC, Oklahoma, Alabama, Clemson, I'm still suspect of because you have a freshman quarterback leading the way who's not probably a great passer yet, but everything around him is great at Clemson. So I just like certain teams that I've liked from the preseason. Ohio State losing, and we'll get into that game more later this show, but that's kind of the top 10. It's Penn State number 5, Michigan 7, Ohio State 8, Wisconsin 10. You've still got 4 really good Big Ten teams. Nothing's changed, but Ohio State, like Troy mentioned, and we can get into this game first if you want, Troy.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's just parlay right into Ohio State. Game, with my busy schedule, I don't get to watch a lot of games. I'm glad that was a night game. I got to watch it. I got to be able to dissect it a little bit. And I'll tell you, Oklahoma's a good team. Oklahoma, they traveled and they went in. I wasn't so happy with what they did at the end of the game. That's just me personally. We don't have to get into that. The flag in the sod, but the way they played the game, Oklahoma's a good team. They deserve, like I said, to move up to number 2. And you look at Ohio State, and Kevin, it's funny because I'm watching this game and I'm actually hearing you talk about Ohio State deficiencies. That may sound crazy, but yeah, I was like actually in my mind listening to your voice in my head saying where the deficiencies are every time one happened. It's like, what, Kevin already told me these things. Ohio State's still a good team. They're a good team, and that's why I looked at the rankings and I'm like, what? How do you drop them 6 spots? Yeah, they don't have that great quarterback play, but when you look at the makeup of Ohio State, and maybe in week 2, they're not one of the best 4 teams, but, man, it's Urban Meyer, and it's an Urban Meyer coach team. Believe me, that second half, he's probably embarrassed. He's going to go look at some things. He's going to do what he needs to do. Urban Meyer's a guy that is going to do things for his program. It's not about individuals. It's about Ohio State. It's about winning national championships, and he will take a look. And if there's something he doesn't like, he's going to make a change. I don't think he's going to bench Barrett, but I think he's going to take a long look at this and say, okay, where did we go wrong here in the second half? Because that second half, it was a tale of 2 halves. But because, like you said, the first half, yeah, watching the game, you got this. I had this feeling like, man, Oklahoma, man, they're a really good team. They're better than Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
But Ohio State was there. It was tied. Anything can happen. The ball can bounce any way. But Oklahoma just pretty much played flawless that second half, Kevin.
Yeah. And I guess I'll get to this first. It's funny that you say you hear my voice as the game goes on and talking about the deficiencies that Ohio State has, and that's something we've talked about. I don't know if it was this show or one of the other shows we do, but how knowledgeable fans of their team who watch their team religiously week after week after week know more than these quote-unquote experts or AP voters trying to figure out where Ohio State is or where Oklahoma is or where the 49ers are or where the Bears are or the Packers are, the Lions or the Titans or whatever team you want to throw out there. Unless you watch every single play of every single game for these teams, you don't have a real educated guess as to who these teams are. Yeah, you can look at box scores, you can catch parts of certain games, but if you're a knowledgeable, unbiased fan of your team and you can be critical of your team, I guess is the correct word to use, and that's why I like doing shows with you, Troy, is because you're critical of the Packers. You're critical of Wisconsin football, basketball.
Maybe we should plug ourselves right here, Kevin. Maybe we should plug ourselves. Anybody listening out there that knows where there's a sports talk show opening, Kevin and I are ready to go. We are ready to go because like Kevin said, we're not going to sugarcoat anything. We're going to tell you like it is, the good, the bad, the ugly. And if you listen to the beginning of the show, you know that I have no problem getting all worked up. So, yeah, I'm going to plug ourselves, Kevin. We are that way. We know exactly what's going on with certain teams, and the ones we don't watch, we don't try to say we know what's going on. But the ones we watch, like you said, from the kickoff to the 2-minute warning to halftime to the end of the game, we know what the hell is going on. So there, I had to plug ourselves.
No, yeah, and it's a good point to make. Basically, if you're looking for Ohio State football radio, obviously you can get better Ohio State talk than me, although I do watch every single play of every single game of every single season because I'm an Ohio State fan. I just like Ohio State football. So I do pride myself on knowing Ohio State football more than 99.9% of the country just because of how I follow the team. That's not to say that I'm smarter than 99.9% of the country when it comes to football or diagnosing teams and how they are. But it's just what you put your time into. And I put my college football time into watching Ohio State every single weekend. Just like the NFL, the Tennessee Titans, I can tell you the ins and outs of the Tennessee Titans better than 99.9% of the country because I watch every single play of every single Titans game. That's just the way it is. I don't know the Colts like I know the Titans, even though I see them twice a year, and obviously I catch parts of their games throughout the year. I don't know the Colts ins and outs and what Andrew Luck exactly loves to do on 3rd and 13, like I would be able to tell you what Marcus Mariota is looking for. That's just what you put your time invested into. But so if you're looking for Wisconsin football radio, sure, you could probably do better than this show. If you're looking for Minnesota football radio, sure, you can probably do better than this show. If you're looking for general Big Ten stuff and we get into the bigger matchups like this Ohio State-Oklahoma, we're going to dive into it. We're going to watch these huge games that there are because they're huge games and they involve the Big Ten. But if you're specifically looking for Illinois football talk, this just isn't the show for you. We're going to talk about Illinois, and I know certain Illinois guys and freshman running back Mike Epstein, he's bursting onto the scene just a couple weeks in. That's basically all I can tell you about Illinois football. I can tell you certain things of where they're weak, certain bright spots, but to go in depth about the team and, this just isn't an Illinois football show. So we're not going to go in depth about Illinois football unless they're, a top 10 team. And obviously we get to see them more often. It's just not the way it works. If you're team specific, it's just this show isn't it. If you're looking for a general Big Ten show and talking about national stuff, top tens, who deserves to get in the college football playoff at the end of the year, March Madness stuff, this is the show for you. And you can only be so educated, I guess is my point. There's only a certain amount of time in every day, every weekend, and that's kind of what gets me into the AP voters or any committee, whether it's March Madness or this college football playoff committee. These guys aren't watching every single game of every single team. They don't know everything. But I guess my final point is that if you're a critical fan of your own team, and you can be critical of your own team, you know more than these quote-unquote experts do. That's just, I guess, the point I was getting there. But so with this Ohio State-Oklahoma game, again, like Troy said, 3-3 at halftime. Who knows what could happen, but you got the inkling after the first half. Oklahoma's probably the better team here, even though they're on the road. And I thought so too, after 1.5 of play. And I thought that Ohio State's D-line could control the game by the time the game was over. That just wasn't the case. I mean, they were getting after Baker Mayfield, quarterback for Oklahoma, almost every other play, but it just wasn't enough. They never truly knocked him out of the game. They never strip-sacked him. They never got a fumble recovery for a touchdown. They never had a huge play to turn the momentum in their favor. Oklahoma just outplayed them in the second half. I mean, that's all it was. Ohio State's defense played great for one half. But by the end, Oklahoma scored 28 points in the second half. I mean, if you look at even just numbers, J.T. Barrett, like I've said on this show from the start of the show, that J.T. Barrett has had a problem throwing the ball deep. And Ohio State's got a bunch of great athletes, 4-star, 5-star athletes on the outside who are super fast, or you've got a 6'4" guy who I believe is a freshman or a sophomore out wide, but he's not a fine-tuned receiver, route runner yet. Ohio State's just lacking a great deep ball passer in J.T. Barrett. He's just not that. And you don't have great wide receiver play at Ohio State. You've got a bunch of great athletes, which is fine. It gets the job done against every team other than the top 15 defenses in the country. But once you're playing Clemson in the college football playoff a year ago, you're going to get destroyed because you can't stretch the defense. Clemson can just put 8 in the box. They can tell their guys to look for the run. They can tell their guys to press up on wide receivers. Don't worry about getting beat deep because Barrett can't hurt you deep. And Clemson wins 31-0 a year ago. Now, Ohio State plays Oklahoma. You've got a good defense, not unbelievable spectacular, but a good defense that athletically can match up with Ohio State's wideouts and force J.T. Barrett to beat them deep. And he couldn't. 19 of 35, 183 yards, no touchdowns, 1 pick. He just can't get it done deep. And even on the ground, I mean, J.K. Dobbins, the running back, he did fine, 13 carries, so he should have got the ball more, in my opinion. 75 yards. J.T. Barrett ran it like 20 times, it seemed like. I know he had more carries than Dobbins. And Weber, the other running back, is a sophomore coming back from injury. He had more carries than both those guys combined in the game. But Dobbins did fine when he got the ball. Mike Weber had 3 carries, but 29 yards. This team is just a running team with a bunch of really good athletes on it, and so their offense is limited. And it showed when you score 16 points against Oklahoma. And when you're playing one of these juggernaut offenses that Oklahoma has, just like Oklahoma State has, just like Washington, Penn State, USC, Oklahoma, Alabama has, if you're Ohio State, you need your dominant defensive line to be dominant. And you need them to make plays in order to make up for your offensive inefficiencies. In this game, it just didn't happen. That's why they lost. They couldn't completely control the game, which some games they will be able to this year. But on a game-to-game consistent basis and win a national title, I've just been skeptical of Ohio State since the start of this season, before the season started. And I figured I liked Penn State on a neutral field more than I liked Ohio State because of Penn State's offensive ability. That's just the way it is. I like Ohio State's defense more, their defensive line obviously more. But it's college football. And even Alabama can't hold Deshaun Watson and Clemson under 40 points, whether it's a year ago or 2 years ago. You can win the game and win at 42-41, but you're not shutting out a completely dominant offense in college football. It's just not the way it works in college football. So you have to have an offense that scores points. You can't be completely limited on throwing the ball more than 15 yards down the field. You just can't do it and win a national title. And this game just kind of confirmed it to me. Yes, I like Penn State more than I like Ohio State. For sure, 100%. Penn State travels to Ohio State later in the year, so it'll be interesting at Ohio State, a revenge game from a year ago. But Penn State's the better team to me, and I was very close to saying it before this year even started.
I think you did. I don't know if it was on the Big Ten show, but it was on one of our shows that you actually said you liked Penn State. You know, and and again, it goes back to your point, Kevin. We root for our teams, but we're realistic about our teams. Like I said, I look at these rankings. I do. And I see this number 10 ranking for Wisconsin. I'm like, still, they're overranked. I don't think they're the 10th best team in the country. It's just a matter of you're going to put them in the top 10. Don't drop them to 10 because they won 2 games, because you like somebody else now. It would be different, Kevin, if Oklahoma State beat Oklahoma, or if they beat, an Auburn or a Clemson or a top 20 team. Then I could have clearly seen that jump. But come on, South Alabama and Tulsa? You took care of business. You did what you had to do. So be it. You don't deserve to move ahead of a team that's done the same thing. That's what I'm getting with this. And by no means do I dislike Oklahoma State. I'm with you. I like Oklahoma State. But the way that this rolled out, it doesn't sit well with me. And it's going to be interesting next Sunday night when I see the new AP poll. And it, of course, depends on what goes on Saturday afternoon. But I'm already not liking what's going on. And that, to me, Kevin, causes concern when it comes to playoff time. If they're already doing it in week 2, what is going to happen when that playoff poll comes out? I mean, by then, things should be rounded out. But like you said, outside of an Alabama, and I'm not even going to put Oklahoma in that realm yet. They were good, and they looked really good against Ohio State. But really, the only team that I'm, penciling in the playoff right now is Alabama. Because outside of that, you do have 6, 7, 8 teams that could be in the top 4, Penn State included, Michigan included, where Wisconsin was, Kevin, and the schedule, you could almost pencil Wisconsin in there because of their easy schedule. I don't think it's going to happen. I really don't. And again, it goes to the way they play. There's going to be that team, that defense they face, that's going to shut down the running game. They're going to put the ball in the quarterback's hand, and that's going to be the game Wisconsin loses. That is going to be that game. You can mark my word now. Early in September, there's going to be that game where they shut the run down. That offensive line isn't clicking. That offensive line isn't dominating. They can't get anything going on the run. They can't move the chains. Going to put the ball in the quarterback's hand, and it's not going to work. Being realistic about it. But, Kevin, I wanted to, and I'm looking at the time, man, it just flies. It flies, and I know we don't have the radio and, the time and the time slot to stay within, but still, I don't want to bore the listeners, don't want to keep them on the airwaves for hours upon hours. There was a game to me, Kevin, and a game we mentioned last week that when you brought it up, I said, whoa, you better tie your shoes, you better pony down because it's going to be one heck of a ball game. Throw the records out. Iowa State. I lived in Iowa for 4 years. I said, doesn't matter what the records are. That's going to be one heck of a ball game, and it went to overtime. Is Iowa better than Iowa State? They sure are. But that was the rivalry game. When you look at it, that they just dislike each other. Kevin, Iowa can score. This is like a total 360 for Iowa. Normally you think of Iowa and you almost think it's a mirror image of Wisconsin. They want to run the ball, control the clock, move the chains, play great defense. Well, it's the other end of the spectrum this year. They can move the ball up and down the field at will. But they also get the ball moved up and down them on the field at will against them. They have no defense. They can't play defense, but they certainly can score. I text you during that game. I text you and said, whoa, look what's going on in Iowa. That was a game. That was a game that I found, and I had to find the highlights because I wanted to see things. Man, that was a game. If you liked offense, there was a lot of it in that Iowa game. Kevin, I look at the Iowa win. Yeah, they're 2-0, but the way they're playing football, I don't think they're going to fare very well in the Big Ten. They're going to have to find those teams where they have offenses that are not very good and their defense is mediocre to win. Like even against the Wisconsin team, they haven't faced a defense like that. You're not putting up 30, 40 points.
Right.
Can you stop the Wisconsin run game, though? I don't think they can. I don't think Iowa has a defense that can stop anybody right now. What are your thoughts on that game? I thought it was a great game.
What was interesting to me is coming into the year, people thought that Iowa had a solid defense and you could run the ball, and you had a Nevada transfer who came in who was a running back, and okay, that's cool. We can run the ball, and still Iowa has a Crum Wadley who can run the ball. And okay, we're going to be a running team, and Wadley had 28 carries in this game, and the transfer had 10. And so 38 carries between those two running backs. So Wadley and Butler, the transfer from Nevada, Wadley has been with Iowa for a few years now, but both of those guys control the game on the ground. And that's what happened in this game for the most part. But Nathan Stanley, the quarterback, threw for 333 yards, 5 touchdowns, no picks. That was the shocker to me. I knew Iowa could run the ball. And I thought Iowa had a decent defense coming into this year. That was the thought. And you stopped Josh Allen in Wyoming week 1. Josh Allen, who could be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft next year. They held Wyoming to 3 points. And it's like, okay, this team can play defense. It's confirmed. Just like people thought in the preseason, Iowa can run the ball and they can play defense. And then this game happens, and it's like, okay, Iowa can obviously throw the ball when they need to, and they can still run it as well with Wadley and Butler. That's cool. But where did the defense go? I mean, that was my overall take from this game. You stop a number 1 overall pick quarterback potentially and his team to 3 points, and then you give up 41 to Iowa State. This team to me is just inconsistent. I think you've got abilities on offense. I think that Iowa will be able to run the ball against most teams. But like Troy said, when it comes to playing a Wisconsin, an Ohio State, a Michigan, a Penn State, those top 4 teams in the Big Ten, Iowa's not going to be able to score 40 points. And they're not going to be able to contain the athletes that an Ohio State has. Michigan's got their problems on offense, but they'll be able to score into the high 20s against Iowa. Probably the same thing with Wisconsin because, like Troy said, I don't know if Iowa would be able to stop Wisconsin's running game. And Penn State's got the best offense in the Big Ten and one of the best in the country, if not the best. So I don't think Iowa's going to beat a team like Penn State. And just I looked at Iowa's schedule, and they play Penn State at home. So at least they get them at home. But at Northwestern, we'll talk about Northwestern for a minute. They also play Ohio State at home, but you go to Wisconsin, you go to Nebraska. It's non-conference-wise, you're glad you played Wyoming. Iowa State, you won that game. Week 3, you play North Texas. But after that, you play Penn State. It's going to be hard for Iowa to rack up 10, 11 wins this year because it seems like an inconsistent team to me. But so gone through 2 of those games from a week ago, and Troy, like you said, we don't want to keep the listeners here forever. So I'm going to go through the week 2 games, talk about what I think is worthy of talking about, and if you want to interrupt me, obviously you can feel free. How does that sound?
That sounds good. Roll with it. Go over the games, the results, and then just highlight the key matchups of week 3 if you want, or just run down the schedule. I don't have really much more to say about this weekend's game. I think we talked about the ones we wanted to, and just looking forward to week 3. So go ahead, roll with it, buddy.
Yeah, so week 2, just recapping that, Purdue beating Ohio. They won 44-21. Both quarterbacks, we've talked about Purdue quarterback situation. You thought it was David Blau coming into the year, and the Sindelar guy is coming in for half the game as well. Both quarterbacks did well, obviously putting up 44 points, but Purdue, just talent-wise, isn't going to match up with the top 4 of the Big Ten for sure. Next, Penn State beating Pitt 33-14. Like we said, we expected Penn State to do better in this game. I'll say that tight end Mike Gesicki is a heck of a tight end. 4 touchdowns in 2 games, only 10 receptions, but 97 yards. 4 touchdowns in 2 games so far this year. Mike Gesicki, the tight end for Penn State, he's just another key player in that offense alongside a great quarterback in Trace McSorley, great running back in Saquon Barkley. That's the team to beat in the Big Ten, in my opinion, is Penn State. Michigan beat Cincinnati 36-14. We already talked about that. It was a closer game than what the final score would indicate. Ty Isaac is the guy from Michigan to watch offensively. USC transfer. I think he's a fifth-year senior now. 20 carries, 133 yards. Didn't score, but no other running back for Michigan had more than 5 carries. Isaac's obviously the guy that Michigan is going to lean on this year offensively, and their defense, despite losing 10 starters, like I said before this year started, Michigan's defense is going to be dynamite because it's a Jim Harbaugh team. Wisconsin beat Florida Atlantic 31-14. Already talked about Jonathan Taylor. 26 carries, 223 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's a freshman. He's the next big thing at Wisconsin. This game was interesting to me. Northwestern lost to Duke, which, okay, I guess I understand, although I thought Northwestern was going to take care of business. They lost 41-17. Northwestern got killed by Duke. And their quarterback, Clayton Thorson, I thought was decent. He played atrociously in this game just by the box score. Again, I didn't watch every second of this game, but 11-29, 120 yards, 2 picks. I thought Thorson would have done better against Duke. Even their running back, who's the best running back Northwestern's ever had in terms of stats, Justin Jackson, he had 7 carries in this game for 18 yards and a touchdown. Typically, if you're Northwestern and you want to run the ball and you've got one of the best running backs, if not the best running back you've ever had in program history, you want to give him the ball more than 7 times. I didn't understand that. They had a wide receiver week 1 who kind of stepped up. I think it's 6'3", 6'4". Bennett Skowronek, a sophomore, he only had 1 catch in this game. But Northwestern was 1 for 10 on third downs. I mean, Duke's defense just shut them down. I didn't understand that. When I saw the final score, I was like, what in the world is this? Because Northwestern, to me, was probably a top 20 team in the country. I thought Northwestern was that good. Obviously, you don't lose to Duke by 24 points if you're a good team. So that surprised me. We talked about Iowa State already. Maryland beat Towson 63-17. That's Maryland crushing an FCS school. There's not much to say about that. Indiana beat Virginia 34-17. I think Indiana's a pretty good team, and they went on the road and took care of business against a Virginia team who's decent. What was interesting was Richard Lagow, the guy who threw for 400 yards on Ohio State week 1, he actually got benched in this game. And Peyton Ramsey came in as a quarterback who was more of a runner, and he finished like 16-20 through the air. He had like 2 or 3 touchdowns. So that was interesting. Indiana's offense, whether it's a guy who can throw for 400 or who's a better runner in Ramsey, Indiana's got a nice little team this year. I'll say that much. Michigan State beat Western Michigan 28-14. Western Michigan lost to USC week 1, fairly close. Michigan is obviously beating a at least decent Western Michigan team here. So that was good to see from Sparty, a nice little decent victory over a decent team. Keep saying the word decent because that's just what it is. LJ Scott didn't fumble after fumbling twice in week 1. Brian Lewerke, the quarterback, had 9 carries, 81 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's, again, something I didn't see, just something I saw on the stat sheet that was interesting to me. Michigan State's going to bounce back a little bit this year. They're not going to finish 3-9 like they did a year ago, which is good. I like Mark Antonio. Obviously don't think he should be fired, which we've talked about on the show. Rutgers lost to Eastern Michigan 16-13. This is the bottom dweller of the Big Ten, obviously. And to me, if you watch Rutgers, you have to give Janarian Grant the ball or you're going to lose. And even he had 8 receptions, 91 yards, but he didn't score. He had a 27-yard punt return. He tries to do everything he can for that team, but Rutgers is Rutgers football is Rutgers football. There's not much to say more about that team. Nebraska lost to Oregon on the road 42-35. Again, on the road, a loss to Oregon, 7 points. Seems like a not that bad loss, but Nebraska was down 42-14 at halftime. And then they won the second half 21-0. So Nebraska was getting slaughtered in that first half, and then they kind of played catch-up from that point on to make it an interesting final score. But Oregon completely dismantled Nebraska in that first half. Nebraska lost their number one player on defense before the year started. We talked about that. And it's showing when they're playing good offenses, giving up 42 points in the first half to Oregon. Nebraska is just not a serious threat this year. I believe 2 more games to go for week 2. Illinois beating Western Kentucky 20-7. Like I said, Illinois freshman running back Mike Epstein, he's the guy to note for Illinois football this year. 21 carries, 111 yards this week. After week 1, he had like 7 or 8 carries, but they were a good 7-8 carries. Scored a couple touchdowns. This week he got the bulk of the load as opposed to week 1. He's kind of the guy to look for going forward. You got a nice freshman running back in Wisconsin and Jonathan Taylor for sure. And I think you've got a pretty good one here in Mike Epstein in Illinois. I think if they're going to end up winning games down the road, not necessarily this year, but 2 years, 3 years from now, I think Mike Epstein is the guy to look for when watching Illinois football. Lovie Smith, if he's going to keep his job, just give it to Epstein, basically, is my thought. And finally, Minnesota beating Oregon State 48-14. Minnesota struggled with Buffalo week 1. They actually threw it 8 times in this game against Oregon State, and they ran it 58 times against Oregon State. A couple of junior running backs. One had 30 carries, another had 17. Shannon Brooks had 3 touchdowns. Rodney Smith only had 1. But Minnesota just kept it on the ground and just pounded Oregon State for a 34-point win. And that is week 2, Troy. I guess, do you have anything on those games? The Northwestern one was interesting to me, seeing Northwestern get dominated by Duke. But otherwise, I'll get into week 3 whenever.
Yeah, I mean, that was the only surprise to me. Like, again, you go down that list, it's just cupcake games. And I know that you're talking about teams that are not dominant teams, that are not top 20 teams, so it's comparatively it's not like an easy game, as I air quote easy game, but you're Big Ten. And so if you want to be considered a good Big Ten football team, you should be taking care of these teams. And Northwestern is a team that I thought, Kevin, could maybe surprise some teams, maybe be in the upper half of the division, and they still could be. It's like anything. It's early in the year, but it's Duke football. I mean, when you say Duke, do you think of basketball? Now, not to take anything away from Duke football. I know that they've had some players, but they're not a dominant force. You're Big Ten against Duke football, you should be winning that game 99 out of 100 times. I know they play in the ACC, but it is Duke football. It's kind of like Ohio State football in a sense that Ohio State football is going to dominate over that basketball team even if they have a few good years. And it's kind of like Duke football against Duke basketball. Duke football might have some good years, but they're never going to get any notoriety. Nobody's going to Duke to play football. If you're going to Duke, you're going to play basketball. And Ohio State maybe not the best comparison because they do get some good basketball players there. But my point is, some schools are meant for one sport. And again, I know their coaches are doing a good job and players go there, but it's Duke football. And so if I'm Northwestern, I'm actually maybe kind of embarrassed that I lost to an ACC team because we're the Big Ten. And you're supposed to be not a bottom feeder in the Big Ten. You're supposed to be middle of the pack, maybe in the upper part of your division, and you laid an egg, a big egg, like an egg that hurt. Like laying that egg probably hurt because it was Duke. I could see losing by a field goal, a touchdown, pick six. They got manhandled and embarrassed. And if I'm Northwestern, I'm back at the drawing board going, are we really in the upper echelon of our division in the Big Ten? That's what I would have to say. That's the only thing I have from week 2, Kevin.
Yeah. In week 3, there's not a lot of good games as I'm scrolling through. And again, I've got very short notes on these, but I think the best game involving a Big Ten team is probably Wisconsin at BYU. And BYU has not lived up to, I guess, my expectations of this being a possible top 25 team. They haven't looked like that, but I'll go through the schedule quickly. Illinois at USF, and USF's actually number 22 in the country. If there was a group of 5 school, one of those schools that's not from the Big Ten, ACC, Pac-12, yada, yada, to watch and who could be a top 10 team, it would have been USF. They haven't necessarily proved that to be the case, though. They were supposed to be the best team of the rest, and USF still ranked number 22. They're 2-0. They just haven't dominated like people expected them to. People expected USF to go undefeated this year and dominate most of their competition. They just haven't necessarily done that yet. But I think USF's probably the better team. I think if Illinois wants to win, again, hand the ball off to Mike Epstein and control the clock. And hopefully your defense does get burned like they have throughout this year, although Illinois is 2-0. So I guess you can say that. Ohio State plays Army at home. Army is 2-0, but they beat Fordham and they beat Buffalo last week. Unfortunately, Troy, Buffalo lost last week to Army. But Ohio State will obviously turn things around, and JT Barrett will look great, but it'll be against Army. So take it for what it's worth. Indiana plays FIU, Florida International University, which is located in Miami, except that game's actually not happening because it got canceled. The game's in Indiana, which I found interesting, but FIU traveling to Indiana, I don't know if flights are still canceled coming out of Miami due to the hurricane. I know it was pretty bad down there in Miami, Hurricane Irma, but that's just what it is. This Indiana FIU football game at Indiana got canceled for week 3. That's not supposed to be made up at any point in time this year, but I know Indiana's looking into their bye week, which is, I think, in October, and they're looking to quickly probably schedule a cupcake if possible. I know that's what Indiana's looking to do. To move on, number 7, Michigan plays Air Force, and Air Force is 1-0 so far this year. They had a bye last week. Michigan should take care of business. Nebraska plays Northern Illinois. Both teams are 1-1. Northern Illinois lost to Boston College week 1. This isn't a great Northern Illinois team like we've somewhat seen in the past few years. When you had a couple NFL guys on that team, this isn't that kind of a Northern Illinois team. It'll be interesting to see if Nebraska's defense can turn things around there. I guess I'll save Wisconsin for last. Minnesota plays Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee is 1-1. Minnesota should do just fine in that game. Iowa plays North Texas. North Texas is 1-1. Iowa should do just fine there, but this is a very weird Iowa team in my opinion for what you're going to get from them week to week. Rutgers plays Morgan State, and both teams are 0-2. That's not a game I'll watch. And if you're watching it, again, watch Janarian Grant at Rutgers. Hopefully Rutgers can get their first win over Morgan State for the year. And I expect Janarian Grant to score in that game. I guess that's my bold prediction of the week. That's really not that bold. Purdue at Missouri. I guess that's probably the most competitive game of the weekend, probably for the Big Ten. Missouri's favored by 7 points. Purdue, you're still not really sure what you're getting at quarterback, whether it's Bluff, whether it's Sindelar. But regardless of who it ends up being, Purdue's offense ends up doing fairly well, at least. But they're up and down. Missouri's not great. They're not terrible. Drew Lock's the quarterback at Missouri. I know that much. I know he's decent. That'll be a decent game to watch if you're a general Big Ten fan in Week 3 looking for a good game. I guess that's the one you'll turn to. Week 3 for the Big Ten, not exciting. This coming from a Big Ten show. We're just putting it out there. Penn State against Georgia State. It's Georgia State. So Penn State's going to win by 50. And Northwestern plays Bowling Green. Bowling Green's 0-2. So I think Northwestern will be able to right the ship after getting killed by Duke. Although, I guess, who knows with this Northwestern team. I was obviously wrong on thinking Northwestern was probably a top 20 team in college football this year. It just does not seem to be the case. But lastly, decided to leave it for last. Number 10, Wisconsin, traveling to BYU. BYU over the years, to me, close to, if not, end up being ranked in the top 25 by the year's end. I thought this would be an interesting game for Wisconsin. And scheduling at BYU, I don't think is complete cupcake city, although this year BYU is 1-2, and they beat Portland State week 1. So that's nothing, realistically. And then week 2, they lost to LSU 27-0. Kind of embarrassing. Then in week 3, they lost to Utah 19-13. Utah's a Pac-12 school. I guess BYU kept it close, but Utah's not supposed to be great this year. So BYU kind of underselling what I thought they were going to be this year. It's a road game. It's BYU. They're going to have talented guys. They're not going to be, exceptionally talented guys, but they're not going to be trash. I don't think Wisconsin wins this game by 30, 40 points, but I don't think it's going to be as close as I initially thought it was.
So they'll probably drop out of the top 5 then, Kevin.
That'll be the case.
They'll win by 10 and drop to 21. I had to say it. I had to be a sarcastic, you know what. I just had to be. Because it's Wisconsin football at BYU. I mean, score's probably going to be in the 20s. Wisconsin could pull this out by 7 or 10 points. Wisconsin's not built to go and blow out people. That's all I'm going to say about the game. I mean, it's BYU. It's on the road. It's still considered a half cupcake. This is like one of those cupcakes, Kevin, that you just took out of the oven and you didn't frost it yet. That's what kind of cupcake that game had for Wisconsin. Wisconsin should win this game. I mean, talent-wise, the way that the programs are set up, Wisconsin should win. It's not a true cupcake. It's like an unfrosted cupcake. That's how I'll put it. It's an unfrosted cupcake game for Wisconsin.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see them. I think the game's on ABC. I'll obviously, as an Ohio State guy, watch Ohio State Army, but my interest goes to Wisconsin BYU. I haven't seen a second of a Wisconsin football game yet, but again, I've read about stuff with Jonathan Taylor, the freshman running back we've talked about on the show throughout the last 3 weeks of this show now. I think he is going to be the real deal, and I think that if Wisconsin does end up winning by 20, 30 points, it'll be because of him, and I think he's going to really start getting notoriety, maybe not necessarily with this BYU game, and then the team has a bye, and then they play Northwestern, who's not as good as I thought. You travel to Nebraska, who can't play defense really, and then you get Purdue at home, you get Maryland at home, you travel to Illinois, you travel to Indiana, you get Iowa at home, and then finally in the middle of November, Wisconsin plays Michigan. At that point, I think it's safe to say 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think Wisconsin will be 10-0 heading into that game in Camp Randall, middle of November when they play Michigan. It'll be interesting to see where Wisconsin's ranked and where the College Football Playoff Committee is.
19. Apparently they win and they drop a spot. So every win they drop a spot. So they'll drop to 11 this week, then 12. So they'll be like 19.
Yeah, I just ultimately, I think Jonathan Taylor's going to put up probably Heisman-level numbers, I think is my opinion, because I think this Wisconsin offense wants to run the ball. I think Hornibrook at quarterback's a sophomore. He's not trusted to throw the ball 30, 40, 50 times a game.
If he is, if that's the stat line at the end of the game, Kevin, and he's got 30 attempts, the Badgers lose.
Yeah.
The Badgers will lose. If he has a stat line where he's throwing the ball 15 to 20 times, then they're probably in control of the game. If he's throwing it 30 times, they lose. It's not going to happen because that's way too many times to put the ball in his hand. Now, again, I actually like him as a quarterback, Kevin. I think he's got an upside. I think he's got some potential.
Yep.
But he's a young kid, and it's first year under center, big stage, and he doesn't have a ton of weapons on the outside. So maybe a recruiting year, get a really good receiver in there, because the Badgers have produced some good receivers over the years. They can get receivers there. And you got an offensive line that can protect you, and you got a running game. If he can improve that skill set and really get good in play action, maybe Wisconsin will have something in a year or two. Maybe even by the end of the year. I don't know. I don't know the learning curve of this young man. I like some of the things I've seen. It's just he is not built right now, and he doesn't have the talent right now, along with any skill players on the outside that are game breakers, to be able to throw the ball 30 times and have this Wisconsin team come from behind. He's got to play with a lead. And he's got to get a little more comfortable in the pocket, in my mind. You know, the big thing with Wisconsin football, move the chains. We're not asking you to throw a 40-yard bomb. We're asking you to throw a 4-yard out, because the running game should set you up for 3rd and short. If it's 3rd and long, it scares me with this team, Kevin. If it's 3rd and 5, 3rd and 4, I'm okay with that, because the way that this team is set up, Wisconsin's a threat to run the ball on 3rd and 4. They don't have to pass it. And so I just a lot of question marks right now at quarterback. But I'm not saying that they need to get a new quarterback. I'm just saying he needs some experience. He needs to get better. He needs to learn the game a little bit more. But I think he could be a good one. That's all I have on Wisconsin.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's a lot like a year ago, where Wisconsin beat LSU, but it was 16-14. You're just not going to score a bunch of points against a great defense. I don't think that's the case changing from a year ago when he was a freshman. Horny Booker was a freshman. It's just, you're not going to ask him to throw the ball 30 times and lead your team down the field for game-winning drives. It's hard to see. And it's not as though he's not a talented kid who will eventually be a good quarterback at Wisconsin. I think he will be a good quarterback. I don't know if he'll ever be fantastic, but I think he will be good. He just needs to be given time. Like I was saying, like a year ago, you score 7 points at Michigan. Against Ohio State at home, you score 23, you end up losing the game. I guess at least you scored 23. But Nebraska at home, you scored 23 points a year ago. The games you completely obliterate teams, if you're Wisconsin, at least in the Big Ten, Illinois and Purdue. You know, you score 48, 49 points. But Big Ten championship game, Wisconsin scores 31 points, but against that Penn State offense, they scored 38 against you. It's just, you have to have Jonathan Taylor, a freshman running back, kind of control the game to win if you're Wisconsin. And again, just go into their schedule. I think they do that 10 times in a row to start the year. It's going to be interesting when they play Michigan at home. It's going to be a low-scoring game. Can Wisconsin's defense hold down Michigan's running game? That's what it's going to come down to, in my opinion. It'll be a great game. And I think Wisconsin, you know, despite the jokes of them dropping a spot every week, which they have done, unfortunately, they will be a top 10 team. I think they will be 10-0. We're not going to know a ton about Hornibrook and the development of those receivers and him as a passer until that Michigan game, just because of how the schedule lays out. It's hard if you're a Wisconsin fan, if you're a Big Ten fan, to truly gauge where this Wisconsin team is. But again, by the end of the year, I guess I'll end the show with my thoughts on this, that I think a freshman running back, Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin, will end up. He's obviously getting the bulk of the carries week 2, and that's going to continue. You're going to get a 10, 11, 12-win Wisconsin team with huge running back numbers from Taylor. I think he could be a top 5 invite Heisman hopeful guy on the screen on ESPN trying to win the Heisman Trophy by the end of the year. And if they go and beat Michigan, then you finish the year with Minnesota. You got the Big Ten title game. It just takes one upset, in my opinion, for Wisconsin, and they could be perfect. And you could have a Heisman Trophy potential winner as a freshman running back. I think it's possible, and in large part it's because of the schedule.
It very much is. And that very, 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 how many varies can I put in front of that offensive line? Very good offensive line. But, hey, be a benefactor of the system. That's what it's all about. But with that said, Kevin, we're going to let the fans go. Our time is up. Hope you enjoyed the show today, everybody. Find us on Twitter at Kid Cunny is the youngster. I am the old man, Troy Robert 967. Hope you enjoyed the show. Have a good afternoon.